Star of the show is going to be Josh, right? But I want to give you a lay of the land for what we do, where we sit within the environment, and then allow Josh to take the reins and show you in real time what we do. So, with that being said, what Halcyon aims to do is enhance EDR. We are not an EDR replacement. As you know, ransomware attacks are on the rise. You can just any simple Google term will show that ransomware is out there, which means they're circumventing EDR. It is not the fact that EDR is bad. It is not the fact that your endpoint protection is bad. Bad guys are bad guys. They're figuring out ways to circumvent the system, right? The way I explain it is your EDR, your EPP, your XDR, whatever you have in your environment is the seatbelt in a car, right? If you don't wear your seatbelt, you get pulled over, you get a ticket. Same thing goes with EDR, EPP, and XDR. If you don't have it, the federal government finds out, you're going to get fined because you don't have the right protections in place. However, God forbid you get into an accident that necessitates more than a seatbelt. That's where the airbag comes in, right? You don't want to go directly to your recovery with a hospital or, Lord have mercy, anything worse than that. That's your immutable backup. That's worst case scenario. It takes weeks to pull that back, but you have an airbag in your car. Is it a requirement to have an airbag? No, you won't get a ticket if you don't have one, but it's a better to have it, not need it, than need it, not have it. And where we sit within an environment, your EDR is the first stab, does a brunt of the work. 93 to 95% of the time, it will stop ransomware, malware, Trojans. It's a boil the ocean mentality. However, with ransomware being the way it is, we are the next step to prevent any catastrophic damage so that you don't have to go to, God forbid, an immutable backup or, recovery in weeks. So we sit next to the EDR. We do not step on toes. We don't overstep our bounds. EDR has first stab. But if the EDR was to, say, pass it off as a known good process, that's when Halcyon engages. We will evaluate it against trillions of different ransomware variants with our pre-execution engine and heuristics. We will stop that ransomware that has bypassed your EDR, stopping it in its tracks. We have been 100% accurate at this stage of our platform. We have not missed a single one. But we're not silly enough to think that perfection is going to happen in perpetuity, right? So what we do is we build a defense in depth architecture within our platform, the only one on the market that can do this. Let's say, God forbid, it makes it past your EDR. Our pre-execution engine is suspicious of it. We have two additional engines. The second engine will engage itself, which utilizes behavior modeling and AI, specifically called a capsule network, which is thousands of virtual machines running simultaneously. And in real time, we can take that binary that was questionable, throw it up into our virtual machines, and watch what it does to our virtual machines before it's impacting your environment. And let's say it's a Kira. Kira's Russian, as an example. Russian ransomware has binaries built in, has scripting built in that will not allow it to detonate in its country of origin because it's payable on death in Russia. So maybe in one of those virtual machines, we plug in a Russian keyboard. If that suspicious binary goes, uh-oh, this is a Russian keyboard, we're going to stop the process. We now can inoculate not just your fleet, but every Halcyon agent in near real time. In addition, during this, we are sidekick protecting your EDR. So rather than what we've seen happen, and more than likely you've seen happen, is an injected process into your EDR, a kill off. EDR killer is a prime example. Killing off your EDR, tampering with your EDR. We will protect anything from injecting that process, not just in your EDR, but also in preventing deletions, modifications, corruption of your volume shadow copies. So we're armoring your entire stack on the back end. You can think of us as the Robin to the EDR Batman, right? It is a defense in depth architecture. In addition, during this time, we are watching for data exfiltration. So any data that would maliciously move in a ransomware style out of your environment, we're watching to prevent that from happening. So let's say if it's throwing it to mega upload, we will stop that process from happening. We will make sure that we notify you so you're not losing data. You haven't been encrypted. Now, we know that bad guys can figure that out too, right? So we have a third engine that is a part of the stack. This third engine will become a man in the middle. God forbid it makes it past our pre-execution, our behavior modeling, and our sidekick protection, and you're now encrypted. As a man in the middle, we're able to gather seed material data, key data, and entropy, or the behavior of the encryption, giving us the ability to build decryptors in flight. At any given day, we have 7 of the top 10 already built decryptors ready to go, which means if you're encrypted with one of those 7 in near real time, you won't even know that you were encrypted in that environment. But if we need to build a net new decryptor, one we've never seen before, something that came out of the ordinary, out of the blue, something that is very novel, if you will, since we have that seed data, since we have that key material data, since we have the entropy, we can build a net new decryptor. Current average time to build a net new decryptor is 4 hours. So rather than the average of 21 days of being down, worst case scenario is you're down for 4 hours, you have a decryptor, and we guarantee that we will make sure to get you back up and running. You won't have those corruptions, you won't have those issues, that we warranty our product that if you are ever hit, we will give you incident response retainer hours, 0 cost to you. Not to mention all of our stack is monitored 24/7, 365 by our research, intelligence services, and engineering team, and their current response timelines are 15 minutes. So if you were to ask myself for any platform that is a set it and forget it mentality, this is as close as you're going to get, because they will do all the response. They will make sure to note those. They will give you the contact. They will build those decryptors if you need it. They are there to make sure that ransomware does not cause your companies to go down, right? Now, with all of this to be said, cyber liability providers have noticed in our timelines. They have seen that we sit at less than 30 megs on the endpoint. They have seen that we can do this, and we've done it multiple times for 3-letter agencies. We've done it for customers who came to us after they were hit. We've done this so much that cyber liability providers are offering discounts on cyber liability premiums just to have us installed alongside your EDR, which means this becomes a net 0 cost for a product. So you've got set it and forget it, net 0 cost, and you have resiliency, right? Now, like I said, not going to bore you with slides, promised 2, that's what I'm going to stick to, but where the rubber meets the road is having Josh show you a live ransomware variant attack and environment so that you can see how we respond to those. So I'm going to hand it to Josh.
I'll kind of set the stage for essentially what we're going to run through. Ransomware in itself is not a single, binary execution type event. It is multi-staged. It is, hands-on keyboard. It's generally, somebody has gained access to the environment through RMM tools or other methodologies. There's that initial access to the environment. So, usually through credential harvesting, social engineering, whatever methodology it is to get, more common is RAS as a service. So, the threat actor essentially engages with the initial access broker to gain, the credentials to get into the environment. Once they're in the environment, they essentially are doing reconnaissance to kind of identify the targeted endpoints, where the data is, what type of attack that they want to, perpetrate, whether it's simply exfiltration of data, whether it's exfiltration and, encryption. The actual execution of the code, though, that generally happens very fast. It's kind of a high velocity smash and grab type situation. So generally what we see is, initially some sort of net new 0-day package application executable that's run within the environment. So when we talk about other EDR tools and EPP tools, they function to primarily block stuff that they've seen before. There's hashes, signatures, even pre-execution or static AI models are really built around stuff that they've known and seen. So those are pretty easy to get bypassed simply because this is net new code that ransomware actors are using to execute within the environment. So we allow the essentially how we work with the EDR tools is they are going to get kind of first filter access. So they're going to do what they're designed to do and analyze files, traffic, behavior, and for the most part they do a really good job. They still have a really high efficacy when we talk about the top EDR players in the market. But over the past couple of years, the efficacy is specifically around ransomware has kind of come down. Still in the high 90s, but when we talk about the potential of a 5% miss, a 7% miss when it comes to ransomware, that's a big impact. And so Halcyon sits there to fill that gap. So once the EDR tool has essentially done its analytics and passes it on as either undetermined or good traffic, good files, that's when the Halcyon agent essentially steps in and starts to do its analytics. So we'll just kind of demonstrate what does it look like if we download ransomware onto the system and attempt to execute it on the endpoint. How does Halcyon handle that? So we have our pre-execution engine, which is essentially going to analyze any of those unsigned, unknown processes as they attempt to execute on the system. So this is going to select 10 random samples from our commercial feeds, which come from things like VirusTotal, MalwareBazaar, also our own repository from our threat research, as well as incident response firms that we partner with. So what you're going to see here is the files are going to be downloaded into this directory. We're then going to see the execution of those files, and then we're going to see Halcyon alert to those files being blocked on the system, and we have successfully stopped that execution of the ransomware. Now, when we talk about our efficacy being 100%, we are talking about the preventative engines to date. So as of today, no ransomware has been able, no ransomware binaries that are capable of exfiltration and encryption have gotten past our initial kind of pre-execution phase. Now, for obviously the purposes of the demo, we're going to make some assumptions here. So we're going to assume that this threat actor actually does get past that initial pre-execution engine and actually runs code on the system. That's where our next engine really comes into play, which is our behavioral engine. So our behavioral engine is looking at all processes running on the system and determining if even a known good process or an untrusted process starts to behave maliciously in regards to ransomware-like behavior. So what I'm going to run is a form of Medusa. This has been neutered in that it's not actually going to do the encryption piece, but what it is going to do is essentially do kind of the staging behaviors. So Medusa is going to run. It's going to make some calls to the system. It's going to use command. It's going to do things like BCD edit to create persistency. It's going to make a call to VSS admin to try to delete the shadow copies. And then things like WMIC to maybe turn off a service or disable a program or uninstall. So all of those behaviors are coincide with ransomware-like activity. So the Halcyon agent's going to block an alert to that. So we saw those 3 pop-ups there. We stopped those child processes from actually running on the system and executing and stopping whatever behavior that was. Now, what's unique to Halcyon is how do we leverage that new telemetry to make our product better or bolster our protection. So what kind of happens in the background, as Adam touched on, is that we now have taken that net new binary, that Medusa.exe, we've detonated that within our Halcyon cloud and running it within thousands of kind of virtual environments that are designed to essentially kind of trick the ransomware to reveal itself. Let us fully understand, what is this thing going to do if it successfully executes in different scenarios. So identifying what type of encryption is it going to use, identifying what type of ransomware family is it related to, is it doing exfiltration and whatnot. We do that within really a matter of a few minutes to execute that. What is the amazing part is that we can take that new telemetry, that individual piece of telemetry, and now incorporate that into that pre-execution engine. So that means if this was to laterally move or execute on a different victim, that pre-execution engine would now have that new telemetry to be able to successfully block that, really within a matter of minutes. And that is very different than how other next-gen AV, next-gen EDR tools work. They use what we refer to as a convoluted AI modeling process, which simply means that periodically they choose to rebuild their models. They take all the samples that they've collected in the past, all their new samples, and then they rerun their models. They push those new models out to their endpoints, and then those endpoints are kind of protected with that new modeling structure. That process, though, takes weeks to months to complete. And the issue that we're running into is very similar to the issue we ran into years ago, a decade ago, with legacy AV products, that by the time a new variant was discovered, a signature was created and pushed out, it was already antiquated. It wasn't effective because threat actors were able to kind of modify their code to circumvent that detection. And that was really spurned on the next gen AV approach and technology to the industry. Well, if we fast forward to today, the one thing that threat actors are using more and more is AI themselves. So they're able to actually run thousands of simulations of their different TTPs and methodologies against these new AI models to find what is going to be successful, because they know they have a window of time before those new models get updated. And so that's why we're seeing an efficacy of ransomware slowly kind of go down with those tools, because they just simply architecturally they're not designed to be able to update really close to real time, which is essentially kind of what we need to be able to complete that or combat that. So a couple other things that happen here. So generally, once a threat actor does get onto the system, they're going to do a couple different things. One, we saw that attack of VSS. We have VSS armoring, which is an earlier warning system that ransomware is potentially running on the system. So it alerts us to be able to investigate, and then also allows us to not trust processes that may initiate that call. We don't use VSS for recovery, but we understand a lot of customers do. They're either using VSS natively, or their third-party backup solution, ties into VSS, and they're leveraging it that way. So again, that gives us an earlier warning system to ransomware. The other thing that we do is the sidekick protection. So with an EDR tool, most ransomware actors are going to try to disable that EDR. They want to get past that initial kind of detection engines there, but once they're able to get onto the system, now they really want to completely disable the EDR tool and essentially blind the admins to what's essentially going on the endpoint. They'll do this through a couple different methods. They may depending on how the tool is configured, they may be simply able to shut it off. They may be able to, do some memory allocation overload, which essentially makes that EDR tool kind of go into a repair loop. What's more common, though, is the load of vulnerable drivers. So, BYOVD is bring your own vulnerable driver, and essentially they can load a driver into memory that allows them to gain kernel access to the system and forcibly unload the EDR tool. And then at that point, there's no telemetry, there's no protection happening on the endpoint. They essentially can kind of do whatever they want to the system. So we introduced vulnerable driver detection as part of our kernel guard. which allows us to identify that and start an early warning system and incident response when we see those vulnerable drivers being executed or loaded onto the system. The second side of the kernel guard is the sidekick protection, which is essentially us monitoring the EDR services and processes to ensure that they're up and running. EDR tools aren't really designed to alert if the service is shut down, because there's any number of reasons why that service will be legitimately turned down, whether the system's just rebooting, upgrading, whatever that may be. The Halcyon agent has the ability to identify if that service has been forcibly shut down in regards to a ransomware attack, again, initiating an incident response if need be. There was one other piece there. With certain EDR tools, we actually have the ability to re-enable the tool. So if the threat actor is able to shut it down, we'll actually not only alert to that, but re-enable the EDR tool to keep it up and running. And that specifically puts the threat actors in kind of a catch-22, because even if they're familiar with the EDR tool and how to turn it off, well, they're going to trigger a Halcyon alert if they do that. If they turn their attention to Halcyon and try to turn us off, the tactics, techniques, behaviors that they would have to use to try to turn us off would trigger an EDR to alert there. So again, kind of puts them in a catch-22 scenario from that standpoint. But for the purposes of the demo, again, we're going to kind of continue that storyline. Let's say in this instance, the threat actor does get a foothold, and he's able to essentially he's at the point where he's ready to manipulate data. What you're generally going to see as kind of a first phase is exfiltration of data. Over 80% of ransomware attacks exfiltrate data first before the encryption happens. A few years ago, that was probably less than 20%. So we see a trend where exfiltration is getting a high focus. We even see a lot of ransomware actors where they're solely doing exfiltration. So they're not even, encrypting data. They just want to get the data out. And that leads to double, triple, quadruple extortion from that standpoint. So what we introduced is what we call DXP, or data exfiltration prevention. We're the first to market. We're the only company there to date that has the ability to accurately identify exfiltration of data from the endpoint in regards to a ransomware attack. This is not DLP. So DLP is looking for insider threat. This is specifically looking for external threat of data manipulation and exfiltration. And how ransomware actors do that is through a couple different methods. They'll use various tools to exfiltrate data. Often they'll use a VPN tunneling. So even if at the gateway level you're blocking unknown destinations or blocking nefarious data storage spaces, the fact of the matter is the threat actors are tunneling that data out and can get through the perimeter blocking that generally is there. I'm going to essentially kind of run a tool that's that simulates kind of typically what's done in a ransomware attack. So essentially it's going to enumerate the data. It's going to identify what type of data it wants to exfil. So in this instance, it's going to take everything that's in my documents directory. It's going to compile 3 archive files, and then it's going to attempt to upload it to Mega Upload. Now, it's not going to be successful in this instance because the Halcyon agent successfully detected it. But what we've also done is built an integration with an EDR tool to create an automatic response action. So the EDR tool actually applies a firewall rule to terminate the connection, which then stops the data exfiltration. So out of the box, though, DXP is an early warning system, an alerting system that allows our team, our RISE team, our RDR team, to essentially identify that exfiltration is happening and then initiate an incident response to start an investigation. The benefit of actually disrupting the exfiltration, though, is a couple things. One, by disrupting it, threat actors don't get a chance to kind of cover their tracks. They tend to creatively delete and kind of obfuscate exactly the data that they've taken out of the environment, so which prolongs forensic investigation. Because we've disrupted that, we can clearly see the data that was being targeted. Obviously, the data not leaving the environment is the goal by protecting that IP and protecting the potential misuse of that data. The third benefit too is that by disrupting that exfiltration, again, threat actors tend to not move on to the next stage of encryption. So once they're not successful in that first phase, they generally kind of abort their campaign, move on to the next target, and proceed from there. Um, so again, for the purposes of the demo, let's assume that this threat actor is actually going to be successful in encrypting the data. How do we mitigate the impact of an actual encryption event and allow customers to recover, within a matter of minutes to a few hours, depending on the scenario? And that's really comes from our key capture material intercept capabilities. So in order to really understand how this works, you have to fundamentally kind of understand how ransomware works. So when ransomware actually goes through the process of encrypting the data, it will actually live off the land as much as possible, which means it's actually going to tie into the Windows encryption library to encrypt the data. So the threat actor can code whatever encryption library, whatever algorithm and strength that they want. But they're always going to use symmetric key encryption because symmetric key encryption is very efficient, very quick, very fast. And again, they want to smash and grab. They don't want to prolong this process. The downside to the symmetric key encryption is that it's not the most secure because the same key that's used to encrypt the file is the exact same key to decrypt it. Once all the files have been encrypted, though, the symmetric keys get re-encrypted with an asymmetric key pair, which is way more secure. Now that asymmetric key pair has already been defined and figured out before the data is ever executed. The symmetric key is generated in real time on the endpoint. So if you pay the ransom, you're actually paying for that private key to essentially unlock the symmetric keys, and then you proceed with decrypting the files. Now, the ransomware actors generally will provide a decryptor to do that. The biggest issue with that is more than likely that's designed to open another backdoor to the environment because statistically, victims who pay the ransom are usually shortly thereafter targeted again, either by the same threat actor or by a new actor, because it does take time for them to implement additional countermeasures, once they're dealing with an incident response. The other thing too is they don't put a lot of R&D into their decryptors. So once you pay that, they give you a decryptor, you'll probably find that you're maybe successful in decrypting 50% of your data. But with Halcyon in the environment, we don't have to worry about that because we're actually going to intercept the symmetric keys upon creation on the endpoint. So essentially, we intercept the entropy or the randomness that's used when generating the key, and as well as the seed value, and then the resulting symmetric key for each individual file. And I'll kind of demonstrate that here. Again, I'm going to run a piece of ransomware. This is from Akira. This is an actual Akira ransomware. It's not neutered anyway. It is going to target the documents here just to show you this data is not already encrypted. It's plain text here. I can read it. And I'm going to go ahead and initiate this. And you'll see how quickly this executes. Maybe. There we go. So enumerated the data in my documents, encrypted all the files. I have my desktop changed there. It indicates, hey, I've been ransomed. I have ransom notes on the system. And if we go back to our product keys.txt, we'll see that it is non-readable text, encrypted data. Now, if we look at our log reading tool here, which is focused on the Halcyon logs, we're going to see that we have a key analyzer and we've actually captured the symmetric keys in flight in real time. Now, how this works is we don't store these keys once we capture them locally on the system. There's security concerns with that. We actually store that in the Halcyon cloud. That would also initiate an incident response from our team because our team would see that there was an encryption event and then initiate that. And what they essentially do is initiate proof of life, identifying what type of encryption it was. Did we capture the key? Did we capture the material data? Can we identify the actual source process and sample that, identify what ransomware variant it is, and then determine, do we have a decryptor that works? Now, as Adam mentioned, we have about 7 out of the top 10 at any given time on average. Number fluctuates day to day, but on average, it's about 7. So if we have that decryptor and we show that proof of life, within a matter of minutes of evicting the threat actor, so that's generally the first thing that has to happen, is we have to make sure that the threat actor is no longer in the environment, because there's no sense in decrypting or restoring data until we've successfully done that. So our team actually assists through that whole process of doing an incident response, ensuring that the environment is now secure, threat actor has been evicted, and now we're ready to do recovery. So within minutes of that process, we're able to actually go ahead, push the decryptor down, and decrypt the data on each system simultaneously. So I'm going to do it manually, but essentially how that would be done is the decryptor would be pushed down using the Halcyon agent and then execute on the system. You'll see our data gets decrypted really within about the same amount of time it took to initially encrypt it. We'll do some additional file verification and we'll do some reporting ultimately, so you can come back and see, okay, everything that was decrypted. But we can literally decrypt within a matter of minutes without having to use, restore from backups, which is time consuming and very tedious for a mass infection as that. And obviously not having to engage with the threat actor at all at this point. Once that's done, the customers are ready to go. Now, one thing to highlight is that this technology is a safety net technology. I use the analogy that this is like an airbag in your car. Most people have that technology in their vehicle, but very few people statistically actually see that technology deployed. But you would much rather have it and never need it than be in a situation where you need it and you don't have it. Because our preventative layers have been so successful, no Halcyon customer has had to use this feature of the tool. But again, you would much rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. Cost efficient too. The thing is, Assurance IT is one of our platinum partners. So we have specialized pricing specifically through you guys at Assurance. So something to definitely consider when evaluating. Of course, it's your choice, and I love that you guys joined for this call today. But from a cost efficiency perspective, we know that it's a point solution. We know that you probably don't understand, oh my gosh, this exists, right? It's not an EDR. It's not a budgeted line item, so we price it accordingly. So it is very cost efficient.
Thank you for saying that, Adam. That does sort of lead me to my next slide here, where I say, if you like what you see, if you learned something today and you'd like to learn a little bit more, feel free to use this QR code to book some time with me.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate the time. Thank you for dedicating it today.